A warm welcome to all of you from Shivani Scientific Industries Private Limited to yet another of its ongoing webinar series. This time it is heavily loaded towards medical technology, and our theme of today is entirely focused on a very important parameter, that's witnessing. Many from the embryology field today must have been quite by now familiarized with this concept. But for those few who are still not aware of it, who are still not much conscious about it, in whose minds there is still a wee bit of lingering thoughts, some doubts, some questions, and some queries, I think this webinar should be doing a lot of good to them. And I really hope that their doubts will be cleared as we would be digging a little deeper into the many a times untouched concepts. And to help us assist, we have amidst us none other than Mr. Ross Newman, Product Specialist, IMT International UK. He is responsible for the global implementation of Matcher. This is a witnessing system accredited as per the GDPR protocols. And Dr. Ross's primary focus is to develop simple to implement practical solutions to error prevention, traceability, all focused towards management of cryo stores in human IVF clinics and donor banks. His designing systems involved can be easily fitted around clinics which have existing standard operating protocols and advising clinics how to configure and validate such automated systems. Of course, I'll invite him, but just prior to that, I will be just giving a little bit of an initial, I would say, introduction or a prelude to this topic. Now, we all know innovations and medical technologies coexist. Medical technology strives to improve people's health by preventing, diagnosing, monitoring, and treating disease, as it all improves the patient's quality of life. And today we are seeing that technology is galloping at a breakneck speed. The main difference between medical devices and medical technologies is the concept of connectivity, wherein information technology is the main catalyst, as it incorporates medical devices with IT technologies and connectivity. So what we are going to do now is, we are going to funnel our attention a little more towards the infertility scenario, because I'm sure a majority of the people in this webinar are embryologists or catering to infertility scenario. So we just first touch a little bit of ethical IVFs of IVF, in which there are three professional virtues: integrity, compassion, and self-sacrifice. Now, a little more peep into the brave new world of ART, assisted reproductive techniques. It's a big business, expanding huge, expanding fast, and the rising awareness about the new methodologies, the openness of the people, the readiness of the people to conceive even at an advanced maternal age, all are compounding together and driving the demand for the market. Now, with an increase in workload, there is also an increase, a substantial increase of pressure on the embryologists and the allied staff, who all, in spite of their best efforts, try to deliver their very best, but still fall prey to minor errors, nitty-gritties, and mistakes inadvertently. Because it's common sense that with an increase in work, increase in volume increases the stress, increases the percentage of errors, and thus increases the blame game. As we all are aware of the fact that in the process of ART, there are a number of steps involved, where a number of gametes, embryos, what all is preserved, stored, freshly handled, can be liable to a mix-up. Now, this is a devastating prospect for the potential parents as well as for the clinic. And the emotional impact of such a mistake doesn't affect the donors or the patients involved, but also the clinical staff, the laboratory personnel, and additionally, the legal and the financial burden of such a mistake can be colossal. Now, this is where our witnessing creeps in or steps in, and it needs an undivided attention. Now, well, witnessing, as we know by the generalized term, to hear, to know by personal perception, to see, or the synonyms of which are also many: attesting, authentication, vouching, testifying, etc., etc. Well, the biblical meaning means I see, I have responsibility. Now, what we are going to do in IVFs? We have to ensure traceability and authenticity. Now, in many clinics, witnessing is done manually, double witnessing, in which one person witnesses the actions of the other person. Now, this was mimicked from the industrial medical industry, in which independent double witnessing checks were there. In a busy clinic with multiple procedures going on daily, and with one or two embryologists working and sharing the burden of the load, the stress is huge. So the question arises, they witness, but who is providing witness for them? The problem with the most common system of using another person to provide independent double check includes the witnessing person might not be trained properly. The witnessing person might be interrupted from his immediate task and he doesn't devote his mind totally into it. Who is the responsible person who is doing the witnessing? Do double checks happen upon that witnessing person? How are the details being noted? How is the witnessing documented? Who is the responsible person? So there are questions abounding, plentiful. Or maybe I can say, can I hold immediately a vial of sperm and say with authenticity that this is his vial? Well, there is quite a distance between the cup and the lip. Now, there are many electronic systems: radio frequency identification, barcoding, RFID. But the tasks in the process do not need to be manually witnessed if an electronic system or a witnessing system is used. What is our sole target? The sole target is all the systems in the market methodology of handwriting on dishes, providing real-time data, etc., etc. So this is where technology steps in a big way. The ease on use of this documentation should not be prohibitive to the industry. So in a nutshell, I would wind up by saying, to eliminate the human error, to ensure authentic identification, ensure absolute reliability, trustworthiness. Witnessing holds a key parameter today. Remember, infertile couples are financially, emotionally, and physically stressed. So it's our duty to minimize the stress rather than compounding the same. So to enlighten you all further into the deeper and fine aspects, I hand over the proceedings to Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross, the stage is yours. You can take over, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Kersey, for your wonderful introduction there. And good morning to everybody who's joined this webinar today. Thank you very much for your time. So without any further ado, I'm going to just start my presentation and then we can begin. So hopefully you can all see my screen there. Okay. So my presentation is going to cover the importance of electronic witnessing and traceability in a laboratory. And that's just going to follow on from what Dr. Kersey has been saying earlier on in this webinar. So just to recap, my name is Ross Newman. So I am a product expert for IMT International, and our flagship product is the Matcher electronic witnessing system. Okay. So first of all, why is electronic witnessing and traceability so important in a laboratory? So, well, we think that any electronic witnessing system and traceability system should fit into and complement a laboratory's broader total quality management approach. Okay, and what do we mean by total quality management? Well, total quality management is a broader philosophy rather than just a simple sort of management procedure. It must be seen as the process of improvement, and that's beyond the status quo, that extends into an all-encompassing program of developing and fostering the desire for change and improvement throughout an entire organization or a clinic or a hospital. Okay. So total quality management applies to every aspect of the clinic, and that includes the recruitment of staff, inventories, patient treatment planning, medical and scientific standards, SOPs, air quality control, environmental monitoring, error prevention. And we have a whole list here, and that includes labeling, traceability, reporting as well, and also cryostores management. So you can see that total quality management encompasses a whole range of aspects within any organization. Now, in terms of error prevention, sort of most people are probably familiar with electronic witnessing being an error prevention system, as Dr. Kersey said before. But this should be as much about helping clinics with traceability and compliance and other aspects of total quality management as well. Across each of these areas of benefit, a good electronic witnessing system should also save clinics both time and also importantly money as well. So we'll look at these four main areas that should be delivered by an electronic witnessing system. So firstly, error prevention, as we've talked about before. Secondly, traceability, so having the ability to be able to have a complete audit trail of everything that's happened in the laboratory, the movement of any gametes or embryos, from and back to the patient as well. We should have documents that are available to review that. Compliance as well, so competent authorities, etc., making sure that if you have an audit or an inspection, that you have the required documentation and records available when the regulator comes into your laboratory. And also time and cost saving, as we've already mentioned before. So what I'm going to do is just go through each of these sections individually. So first of all, error prevention. Now, hopefully we all acknowledge that mistakes do sometimes happen in IVF. Though some people still say they don't make any mistakes in their clinic, we actually know that they do. It is a fact that every clinic does, and we see much evidence of this. But why do those mistakes happen? this is the most important part. So it's mainly caused by a relatively small number of factors, and they're called DuPont's dirty dozen, and they're identified by Gordon DuPont in 1993. And most of us will recognize these from our daily work. But one that may be less familiar is number 12, which is involuntary automaticity. So that is when your brain sees what it expects to see and not what is actually happening in front of your eyes. So this happens particularly when performing repetitive or boring tasks like, well, checking patient identities, I suppose. That can sometimes lead to the involuntary automaticity. Now, introducing automated systems such as sort of barcoding systems has been suggested as an effective way to reduce mistakes caused by human error. So, this article that we've cited here relating to involuntary automaticity suggests that automated systems such as barcoding are an effective way to reduce that human error. So patients also know that errors happen too, because there are many examples of the media online, and they have consequences, like Dr. 𝐘𝐫𝐨 said, such as litigation, reputational damage to the clinic, ethical consequences as well. So we may like to think that the misidentification rate is very low, but the data shows that error happens in over 0.1% of ID checks. So in a cycle of IVF treatment, there are often between sort of 10 and 50 individual ID checks. So the risk may be higher than you think. So in a 700 cycle clinic, this equates to about roughly 20 errors per year. Okay, so we've also collated some of the famous public cases since 2007. They show errors happen for many reasons, including no double checks. They include no traceability evidence, include staff misreading the label, and involuntary automaticity when reading sort of similar names, paper records, and also sort of not following procedures. So if we add to this further opportunities, particularly with the recent introduction of time-lapse and PGT, where any preferentially selected material not only has to be identified by the patient, but also by individual embryo. So the number of individual actions starts to mount up considerably when we're moving, for example, from a biopsy dish into a PCR tube, and then into a vitrification dish, and then into the vitrification device or straw as well. So every time we're moving material between dishes or tubes or straws, that increases the chance of a mix-up. So how can you help prevent error? Well, the implementation of an electronic witnessing system can help reduce the risks. And just to help you explain, I'll show you what this involves typically in your clinic. So this is where Matcha can help. And for the remainder of this webinar, I'm just going to touch on specifically Matcha and provide you with the information so you at least can consider this as another vital tool to have in your tool bag and to help you with deal with some of the challenges that may occur down the road. So where does Matcha fit into a typical clinic or hospital? So the short answer to this is everywhere. I mean, right from the point of patient registration, Matcha can be linked to an existing EMR to automatically import patient details and photos. And I talked before about time and cost savings. If you're automatically importing records that you already hold in your clinic, that's going to save you time and obviously money. So patients and partners can be registered into Matcha remotely, well in advance of your treatment actually commencing, without them actually having to visit the centre in person. So the patient can then be witnessed and tracked through the whole cycle of treatment, whatever type of cycle that may be. And we can use portable Wi-Fi scanners, which we actually call pocket matches. So I have one of these here. It looks like sort of a mobile phone device. And they can be used in operating in treatment rooms. And we also have what's called benchtop devices, benchtop mini matches. And they follow sort of the patient's gametes and embryos through any of the laboratory steps as well. Now, At the end of a typical cycle of treatment, Matcha can mitigate the risk of error at the point of embryo transfer and even cryopreservation using specially barcoded labels on straws. And you can see we've got sort of, well, I don't know if you can see that very well, but we have a device here that's been pre-labeled. And also, just to provide you with a visual cue, we also have the PCR tubes that are labeled as well. So Matcha is the only system versatile enough to cover the witnessing of individual biopsy samples and embryos through the PGT process. So we can even track consumables coming into and out of inventory and automatically link the lots of products to patients and their gametes and embryos. So through remote access and wireless technology, the system can even extend outside of the centre. So, for example, a laboratory manager could perform a review remotely from their home, or scanning the empty semen container when it's sent to the man's home and then scanning it back in at the drop-off point later, if you want to perform semen collections at home to help keep men out of the centre. So the key features of Matcha can be summarised here. And Matcha forms an essential part of, like we said before, a total quality management framework, which covers all of these aspects, such as ID security, labelling, workflow scheduling, electronic witnessing, process mapping, lot tracking, and also cryo management. So ID security, first of all, we can produce ID cards electronically that are sent to the patient's phones. Labelling, so customized barcode labels are used, they're clear for microscopy, they're always integrated into every single step, and they contain human readable information as well, which I'll come back to shortly. Workflow scheduling, so we also have a dashboard view that shows a real-time sort of snapshot of the clinic and gives an instant indication of what tasks are left to be performed in the lab. Electronic witnessing, the core of the system, so that's the truly independent second pair of eyes that adds a peace of mind to the patients and the staff. Process mapping, so there's also a forcing function to help ensure that all the required steps within a process are carried out and witnessed, but also importantly in the correct order as well. And that's essentially a vital tool for any new embryologist who's coming to the clinic for the first time. It's a great tool to familiarize them with the processes in your clinic. Lot tracking, as we've talked about before, so automatic paperless traceability of all labware and media. And lastly, cryo management as well. So we can identify, track and locate material stored under liquid nitrogen. So in terms of the system components, so just to help you sort of visualize Matcha at work and in your center, here's a couple of images for you. So first of all, Matcha doesn't require any modification to any laminar flow cabinets. So they don't need cutting up or they don't need modifying. The equipment's small and portable. It doesn't involve any cutting into work surfaces, and it can be implemented really quickly. So if we look at these images in the bottom right corner, we can see there we have a vitrification device under liquid nitrogen. We can see the barcode at the top of the device. So that means also as well that we can scan the barcode under liquid nitrogen vapor as well, which is important if you do not want to fully remove the sample from those conditions. So that's an additional sort of important point to note as well. And in the bottom left corner, you can see we've actually got an example of scanning a man's sperm pot against his ID card with a portable pocket matcher device. And that's sort of the entry into the process typically when we're preparing fresh sperm. And that can be performed in reception, that can be performed by a nursing team. So like we said before, the actual Matcha system is not restricted just to the laboratory staff, which ensures a total quality management solution. Okay, we also have other equipment that's used as well, but it's static and portable, which is the mini Matcha, which is the white device in the center image there. And we can also scan through screens or windows as well. So if you have products that are kept in a fridge, maybe in the laboratory, we can still scan barcodes through there. So you don't need to remove those devices from the fridge. And also as dishes and tubes enter the work area, in this case, maybe beneath a sort of a stereoscopic microscope, Matcha has fold under labels that fold under the actual Petri dishes, so that you can still read that human readable information and verify the patient that you're working with while you're actually processing the material as well. Just to come back to the mini matcha as well on the left-hand side in that picture, that's also a hands-free device, which is activated automatically by the software running on the tablet PC. So if you're interested in, like, say, sort of a aseptic technique and a hands-free sort of approach to your workflow, you don't want a system to interrupt your workflow, then that's a really sort of important device to use, because it allows you to continue witnessing while you're working. And we also have the software, which is part of the Matcha system. So the Matcha system comprises of both software and hardware. In this case, we've got the software, the desktop software. On the left-hand side, we have the scheduler, which we mentioned before, and that gives a clinic a snapshot of all of the procedures and all of the patients that are going to be in the lab on that day. It's also color-coded, so there's a traffic light system to indicate which patients have completed all of their treatments for the day, and they're in green. And obviously we have the patients that are in progress or overdue, and they're in orange and red. So they have a little color code next to each patient record. Sorry about that. So to come to the actual labeling and the barcodes, which is sort of, really the core focus of this. So every dish, tube, straw, semen container should be labeled, ideally, to track every movement of the biological material. Every single barcode on a Matcha label sheet is globally unique as well. So there's no chance of scanning the same barcode twice or having a duplicate barcode scanned. Also importantly, it's completely cryo-proof and totally safe. So we've had Matcha cryo labels in storage, for well over a decade. And they're still perfectly readable and perfectly legible. And sort of that's because these labels, they self-laminate. So that means that the text and the barcode are always protected, and they're not going to sort of disintegrate over time under the stress of coming into contact with liquid nitrogen. So like I mentioned before, we also label even the 0.2 ml PCR tubes and, like I say, all types of vitrification devices. So the labels are typically applied before treatment commences, and most importantly, and I don't know if any of you do this in your clinic at the moment, but they eradicate handwriting on labware, which is a pet hate of mine, but I know a lot of people do that. So it means that you've got clear, easy to read labels where the machine readable barcode is always integrated with the eye readable text, so the machine can take over the job of witnessing for you. It's also fail-safe as well. So because you've got that human readable information printed onto the label, if a system ever goes down, that means you can still read the patient name, the patient date of birth, the patient ID and date of birth, so you can continue witnessing. Whereas with maybe other systems, if you don't have that human readable information and those, those identification methods fail, then you're a bit stuck, which can impact on your ability to process in a timely manner or your ability to identify the specimen at all. So personally, I think that the barcode labels, which contain also the human readable information, are fail-safe. As part of the Matcha system as well, we talked about ID security. So that can either be sort of plastic credit card sized IDs that can be customized with a clinic's own branding, or it can be electronic identification as well. So you can see in the image on the left, we have a smartphone, but also a smartwatch as well. Patients are less likely to forget to bring a phone or a smartwatch to their treatment, whereas with an extra sort of physical ID card, they may be less inclined to forget. That. On the right-hand side, we also have a biometric fingerprint scanner. So we can also, with Matcha, actually scan patients' fingerprints to identify them. And also, patients are less likely to forget their fingers when they come to actually treatment. So that's a really unique development, which ensures patient safety. Because also as well, you can't share sort of, fingerprints between patients as well. So that means it's safe. And, the patient is the patient that you're actually going to work with when they come to reception identify their ID. And also the fingerprint scanners are also cleanable with standard disinfectants such as OSafe. Okay, so how can the system prevent error? I suppose, yeah, that's the right question to ask. So first of all, it replaces a human double checking by scanning a barcoded label. It's an independent second check that witnesses every procedure. So if you ever need to work in a laboratory on your own, you're not relying on a second person to actually physically be in the laboratory, because Matcha can take the place of that second person. There's no weak links. So every transfer step everywhere in the clinic. So Matcha labels can be used on every single type of labware or device, which means that, there's no gaps in the chain of custody. And also uniquely, Matcha photographs every single witness step as well. So you have photographic evidence and proof giving you additional evidence in your chain of custody. And that's something that sort of, your regulators and your competent authorities particularly like, because you have a photographic evidence to support what has happened in your lab. It replaces paper records and reports as well. So I know in a lot of clinics, there's still a lot of sort of lots of files and paper records. However, Matcha can replace a lot of those paper records and reports and make those electronic. Process mapping, which forces a function to follow the clinic's SOPs consistently. Those SOPs can also be modified and customized to the clinic's own requirements. So the idea is that Matcha fits around your workflow, not that you have to fit around Matcha's workflow. Okay. We also mentioned workflow scheduling, and that overview ensures no steps are forgotten. So this is an example of a no match alarm that's actually going to occur. So if we see this barcode actually being scanned with Matcha, so we have the barcode labels. One actual barcode has been scanned on the left-hand side. I don't know if you can hear the audio visual alarm, but also we have, first of all, a visual alarm, which says no match. So straight away we know to stop. Secondly, we have an audio alarm as well. So that alerts me to the fact that something has happened in the lab where either a mistake has been made, or there's been a no match, or we're working with the wrong patient. So that's just a brief indication or a brief look into sort of how Matcha actually captures a mistake in a laboratory. So both barcodes were scanned. We can see both of those dishes were labeled, but obviously automatically, when that incorrect barcode was scanned, Matcha told you straight away it was a no match. You didn't need to interact or press any buttons or scan anything apart from those two barcodes for it to tell you stop. You need to change the patient that you're working with, obviously, because this is incorrect. Okay. So in terms of a chain of custody, it's only as strong as its weakest link, which is why Matcha therefore has no weak links. So one major advantage compared to other systems is that every step is electronically witnessed, and you're not confined to specific work zones. So this includes witnessing in liquid nitrogen stores. So some other systems have multiple points of entry where double human verification is still required, and I can assure you that Matcha only has one point of entry at the point of issuing the electronic ID pass. Again, we talked about the photographic proof. So every procedure is photographed and photos are stamped with the who, the what, the where, and the when. So you've not just got that photographic proof. Each photograph is also time stamped with, like we said, who performed the actual procedure, what was the procedure, where was the procedure performed, and when was the procedure performed as well. Also as well, because Matcha covers multiple departments in a clinic, it joins everybody up. It increases the communication between different departments. And also it allows a remote view from home for those lab managers that I talked about before. We've got the workflow scheduler that we mentioned, which gives us a real-time overview of the patient workflow, and also those traffic lights indicators that we mentioned. So if a clinic wanted to have this displayed on a large screen in their laboratory, that is absolutely possible. So you can also always check which patients are due to come in and what cycle day they are of their treatment. We mentioned the lot and inventory alerts at the point of use. Now, this image illustrates another benefit of using barcodes. So most products will already have a barcode that contains lot numbers and can be scanned when the products are opened and then subsequently used in the laboratory or center. So global standard barcodes, or GS1 barcodes as we call them, they also contain other useful information such as the product code, the expiry date. A matcher can automatically extract that information. If you scan those barcodes with a pocket matcher, as we're doing in this image, it automatically extracts this information. So in your laboratory, you do not have to manually record that information again. I mean, one of the recommendations to emerge from the guidelines sort of includes encouraging IVF centres and donor banks to order supplies as infrequently as possible. But this leads to sort of complex stock management issues. So the latest version of Matcher is able to effectively manage stock usage, including keeping track of stock levels, expiry dates, and reorder points. Now, we mentioned PGT witnessing earlier on in this presentation. So with fewer staff able to be in the laboratories now, witnessing PGT becomes even more difficult and risky without an electronic witnessing solution. So a recent development with Matcher was to introduce Matcher Unitrack, and that includes the witnessing of individual samples through the processing of biopsies for PGT. And that includes vitrification of uniquely identifiable embryos. So Matcher can match the numbered culture well, so the corresponding biopsy dish and the PCR tube. And separately, it can match the same numbered embryo to a vitrification plate and vitrification device to ensure that the biopsy sample matches the embryo that was vitrified at the end of the process. In addition, there's also an option to select the fate of those specimens and then verify that that fate was actually actioned or carried out. So just a couple of thoughts on that. Well, PGT activity has almost doubled the amount of witnessing required through a cycle of ICSI. So it's important to include this and not only identify the patient, but also each individual embryo and biopsy. And Matcher is the only witnessing system that can do this with Unitrack. Okay, we also talked earlier about cryostores management. And of course, witnessing all of the cryopreserved or vitrified material, through the cryostores is incredibly important. Given the recommendations for avoiding, FETs or fresh embryo transfers, in many cases, the number of steps and the number of samples to store is increasing for many centres, and I'm sure it is for you as well. Matcher identifies each and every sample with all of the relevant information required for compliance, and that's also customizable, and it's all on, as we talked about before, the barcoded label. And this can also incorporate donor codes or whatever you need. So we also have a new feature called Matcher Insights, and this is critically important for the laboratory management or laboratory directors. So it's an interactive data visualization dashboard for the analysis and reporting of data captured by Matcher. So in a nutshell, that means you have a dashboard with hopefully all of the important statistics that you're going to need on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis and that you need to report on. And that can answer questions such as, how many errors have we made? How did we make the errors? How often are we deviating from that important SOP? How many cycles of treatment have we performed? Or have we finished all of the tasks that we'd got planned for today? And also in the bottom right corner, we can also examine why or how a practitioner performs tasks much more quickly or much more slowly than another practitioner using standard deviation as well. So we can also start to incorporate and measure timings into our clinic analysis. We can also look at, how much space, like we mentioned before, we have in our cryostores, and are we storing material illegally? Do we need to refresh any consents with our patients? So what else should an electronic witnessing system be able to do? Obviously, preventing mistakes is the most important aspect of this. So some systems also offer traceability functions. We've mentioned before, we can automatically track lots of numbers for all labware, media, and consumables. We also have the labeling. So again, with Matcha, there will be no need to handwrite on any labels. And this reduces the risk of a misread and also saves time. And also the labels are optically clear. So each label contains both the barcode and the human readable data, which is critically important should you ever need that human readable data. Reports and auditing, so they can be created at the click of a button. And again, it's paperless as well, so you can get rid of any sort of paper records. But also compliance. So it's not just about doing the right thing, but also being able to prove it, as I've emphasized in this webinar, just with documented evidence every time. So as part of a quality management framework, an electronic system should help ensure conformance with your standard operating procedures and provide the documented evidence required for external quality standards, e.g., for example, ISO. It'll save you a lot of time preparing for any inspections, and it's configurable to your own requirements. And we can also help with assisting clinics to validate their processes as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to time and cost savings. And this is sort of towards the end of my presentation now. So one common question is, will an electronic system mean I spend more time witnessing? And we can categorically say no, the opposite. A good system is actually going to save users time and also cost, and provide you with that assurance that you are working with the correct patient. So how does it save time and cost? Well, like we've said, we can replace clinics' reliance on human double checking or witnessing, reduce staffing costs at weekends, holidays, sickness cover, and overtime. We can abandon laborious handwriting on label sheets. When you've got a pre-printed label sheet, you peel off the label and you stick it to the device or the dish or the tube. You can also accurately locate cryo-stored items available in seconds. Compliance and administration, so replace the manual form filling, and lot numbers are tracked in real time as well, using the existing barcodes. And it's a turnkey installation, so it's quick and easy to install, test and train, and there's no modifications required to existing systems. And we can also integrate with existing EMRs, such as, like, say, for example, Ideas, Meditex, there's a whole host. So in summary, implementing an electronic witnessing and traceability system should help to reduce the risk of human errors, improve traceability, reduce the burden of compliance, and also save time and cost. So in closing, I hope this very brief introduction has helped to show that it's possible to reduce your risk of human errors, improve traceability, reduce the burden of compliance, and save time through implementation of an electronic witnessing and traceability system. So I'm just going to hand back now to Dr. Kersey to continue with the next section of this webinar.
Yes, so I hope you'll be around, because we have got quite a few questions across over here. And the first and the most important one is that in my IVF procedure, I am utilizing approximately, say, 32 pieces of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So how many are the number of tags per patient being given to me?
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good question. So with Matcha, we've designed the label sheets to hopefully cater for a whole cycle of treatment. So on a typical label sheet, you may get, for example, 60 labels on a non-cryo label sheet, and you'll have maybe another 40 or 50 on a cryo label sheet. So we differentiate between the labels that are going to be used typically in the lab with fresh processing, and we also have a separate cryo label sheet specifically designed for your straws and your vitrification devices, and they're validated for liquid nitrogen storage. So one of the important things to note is, yes, you will have all of the barcode labels required for the whole cycle of treatment, but also you're not going to be charged per label, and that's a critical sort of thing to understand. Is, we need to be careful with the amount of labels we're using. No, that's not important. If you need to print off a second label sheet, go ahead. It won't cost any extra, but hopefully one label sheet should be enough. We include roughly about 60 labels on between 50 and 60 labels on a typical sheet, a non-cryo label sheet.
So each label which I utilize, will that be monitored by your system?
Yes. So each time you apply a label to a dish or a tube, and that is scanned in the system, so that patient identity is already programmed into the barcode. So once you've applied it to that dish, you're free to carry on witnessing straight away, and the system will automatically recognize the patient, also the procedure that you're working with as well, and it will also track, the procedures that you performed. And like I talked about before, the who, what, the where, and the when will all be recorded automatically in the system.
There's one question that suppose I am doing a fresh transfer, storing the extra embryos, subsequently in a thaw cycle, when I'm utilizing the same embryos of that patient, will it mean a next cycle, or will it be incorporated already into the first one?
That's a really good question. So if you're performing, like you say, if you're freezing sort of patient material, so you typically do that in a sort of a fresh sort of ICSI cycle, or whatever that is, then you can store those labels sort of indefinitely, really. And then when it comes to thawing those, you load a new cycle type. So you'd load a fresh embryo transfer cycle, for example. Those straws would be thawed from the cryo vessels, and then you just continue with the transfers. So you'd have one cycle which is just for the fresh processing, and then you'd have load another cycle just for the fresh embryo, the frozen embryo transfer.
Okay, fine. Then one is from the safety viewpoint, from the safety angle, any radiation or cellular trauma, or trauma by the sticker glue, or anything of that sort?
That's a very common question, Dr. Kersey, actually. Yeah, it's a very good question, and a very important question as well. So in terms of the devices that we use, first of all, in the laboratory, so the mini matcher, so the desktop device that I talked about before, it has a little red light, as you can see there. We've also got the pocket matcher as well, which has a white light on top of it there. So both of those, first of all, none of those are lasers, just to answer that question, because we quite often get asked, is it a laser? All they are is LEDs, which have also been independently verified by a European and a North American test house. So they've produced reports which are available for anybody to review, and they verified and confirmed that using the matcher labels and exposing embryos to those red LEDs over extended time periods had no effect on the development of those embryos. So you can be assured that having those devices in the laboratory are not going to affect the quality of the development of any embryos that you're working with. So it's totally safe. We also, just to touch on the label sheets as well, so the individual labels. So every new batch of label sheets that we produce, they're MEA, so mouse embryo assay tested, and we also human sperm survival assay our label sheets as well, just to make sure that they're totally safe.
Another question is, since barcode labeling requires a direct line of sight to detect the dish, will it affect the flow of the procedure, even when we use the pocket matcher?
Absolutely not, because you're incorporating that into your existing workflow. So this little mini matcher, if you're working in your lab or hood, it's magnetic. So in theory, you could actually stick that to a microscope stem if you really wanted to. It's completely movable. So that can be on the back wall of your laminar flow cabinet. It can be right next to the microscope stem. So also, we've developed this so it's hands-free as well. So you shouldn't need to be placing dishes in readers, for example, because the mini matcher or this device is portable, you can put it right next to the microscope stem, so that when the barcoded label passes through into the microscopy area, the mini matcher's already there looking, so it scans it as a matter of course anyway. So there's no requirement to sort of interrupt your workflow by using matcher. Does that answer the question?
Yes. So that means, as far as the safety, as far as the space occupancy, as far as the quality of the glue, as far as the radioactive or whatever, not radioactive, that cellular radiation, all is taken care of. Okay. Yes. Now, one question, In case of any unfortunate mishappening or a misstep, is there any approval or is there any subsequent follow-up help which we can avail of from your end?
That's a really good point. So first of all, if a mistake is made, for example, the first thing that the system will do, it will flag an alert in the system, as you've seen there before. So as part of the traceability of the system, it will ask the user to provide a reason. So what was the reason for that mistake? And you can't move past that screen until you provided a reason. You can configure the system as well to require a second or not a second person. You can require a lab manager to have to approve you to move forward as well. So it may require an ID scan from your lab manager or lab director if you want the system to work that way. It's not compulsory. But also as well, if you have sort of inspections or you need to produce particular reports, of course we can provide help with that, because Matcha has a whole range of reports that are particularly useful when you have any clinic inspections from your competent authorities, whether that's patient reports, whether that's cryostores reports, whether that's witnessing reports, on an individual patient level or on a clinic level as well. So the insights module that I showed you before is particularly useful, and all of those reports can be exported into any format that you need. So you've got all of that, most importantly, the documented evidence, and we can obviously help with any sort of validation as well if you need.
One question from one embryologist. Can we use this system by two embryologists at two workstations on the same laminar?
Yes. Yes, you can. So you could have one of these mini matches at one end and another mini matcher at the other end of the laminar. If it's a double HUD, yes, you can. You can log in. So one user would be logged into the one tablet and a second user will be logged into the other tablet. Or alternatively, if it's a single HUD and you have two embryologists working there, you could have one user logged into a tablet. And because these are portable, the second user could bring the pocket matcher to the laminar flow cabinet, log in and just continue witnessing. So there's no obstruction or barriers to continuing with your work and making sure that you're witnessing every step.
Now, I think a technology related question has sprung up that with multiple technologies available, how does this technology differ from RI witness?
That's another very good question. Yeah, because we quite often get asked, why not RFID tags? Well, as I mentioned before, the barcode label has human readable information on it. So, if the electricity goes down, for example, in a clinic, so because RFID tags do not have any human readable information on them, once that electricity goes down, you're stuck. You have no way of knowing the identity of the patient in that dish or that tube. Absolutely no way. However, if the electricity fails with the matcher system and you have a matcher label on there, it has human readable information. So straight away, even if you scratched a barcode off somehow, it's very hard to do that. But if you wanted to scratch a barcode off for some reason, you still have that human readable information. So you can still physically identify the actual material in that dish. So that's one main bonus as well. First of all, is the fact that there's human readable information on there. Secondly, I'd say because there's two ways of identifying the patient information on the label, so the human readable information and the barcode, that means that it's essentially fail-safe. A third reason, I should say, that you need to use, that's great to use barcodes as well, is the fact that we label every single tube, label and straw throughout the whole treatment process. So my understanding is that RFID tags cannot be put into liquid nitrogen. I'm happy for anybody to correct me on that point. But if you're not applying the same technology throughout the whole process, that introduces risk. If you've got to move from RFID tags in fresh processing to a different methodology when you're freezing and putting items into cryostores, to me, that creates an element of danger or risk. Whereas if you use the same consistent technology throughout the whole process, that means there's no interruptions and no change in technology. And that means for me, that's a lot safer. Also as well, in terms of the tags, I don't know sort of if there is a failure rate of those tags as well, if they have to be sort of pre-programmed, and that includes that involves a lot of technology and coding, whereas once you have that label sheet printed out the day before treatment, you have it and you can see the information that's on there. So you know what it is you're putting onto the dish or the tube. You know it's safe, you know it's printed well, you know the adhesive sticks, etc. So there's several reasons why we'd prefer barcodes. I mean, we've looked into RFID tags, to be honest with you. They're a great technology in certain scenarios, but we feel that in this scenario that they're not the best option. The barcode label is unequivocally the better and safer option in our opinion.
Now the next two questions, I think I'll amalgamate both together. It is that for a new IVF lab, a small IVF lab,
yes,
what must be the starting or the minimum hardware needed and with minimum investment?
The key question, minimum investment, absolutely. Well, we do have some clinics that if they have one hood where they're processing, they might just have just one tablet in the office and one pocket matcher in the lab. It might be as simple as that. So you'll need one printer to print off label sheets. You could use one pocket matcher for witnessing in the laboratory. And you've also got one tablet or one PC for your lab manager to configure your processes, to review all of the reports, to manage sort of the cycles of treatment and to look at the dashboard, the scheduler that I talked about before. So you could have one tablet, one printer, and one pocket matcher. So it doesn't need to be any more than that.
And does this matcher provide any follow-up or a backup service as and when needed? And if yes, to what extent?
So in terms of a backup, what do you mean by a backup service? Sorry,
means maybe I think we are just short of something, or I don't know. There's an element of confusion, or something has gone wrong. Some mismatched readings are there. So how to rectify those changes back?
Okay, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of Matcha as a company, we provide sort of 24/7 support. So if you're ever not sure, you need any support with any sort of configuration, you always have access to our sort of global support. We have a lot of our sort of representatives in country, and particularly also in India as well. We have representatives as well. So the support is always there, whether it's like say locally in country, but we're still accessible. There's not this barrier that stops you from contacting us for any help. We'll always be there, and we're always available to help, whatever time of day or night. We have sort of over 100 clinics actively using, the Matcha system around the globe, and they're absolutely happy with the system and the support they receive. So if there's ever a mistake and you need sort of a second pair of hands, or, some additional help, that support is always there. You're absolutely not left on your own.
So are there any global guidelines to be followed in this case?
So to use the system, we provide a comprehensive sort of training platform for all of our users. So that guides them in how to set that up. But in terms of prescribing sort of any global guidelines, we make sure that we fit around your processes, because we understand in each country the regulatory requirements are all different. For example, in some countries in Europe, you're not allowed to sort of vitrify, you're not allowed to freeze embryos, for example. So we have to come up with a new sort of SOP with the clinic to help them actually, successfully continue treatments while using the system. And because Matcha is completely flexible, it's really easy to change the system to fit around your SOPs. So in terms of the differing regulatory requirements, yes, we can 100% configure the system to fit your requirements.
So any set checkpoints, any ideal number of checkpoints which we have to follow right from the time we rip off the label and stick it onto the gadget, and subsequently follow it all the way to the end?
Yes,
if the more checkpoints are there, maybe it's a sort of a confusion, or maybe a time-consuming factor, or an additional stress on the embryologist.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
He or she will be loaded with not one or two cases. Maybe the cases depend upon the strength of the load the clinic has. So any restriction as far as The lesser the checkpoints, the better. The more the checkpoints, the better. Can you just highlight on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's a good question. So typically we would say that you need to apply sort of a barcode label to every single sort of dish and tube that you process in the lab. That's our recommendation. But we understand, obviously, clinics operate in different ways. So some clinics may not want to electronically witness every single label, or they may not want to electronically witness every single check in the laboratory. They may have their own methods. So we're completely flexible in terms of, we're not going to force you to label every single tube or every single dish. That is, of course, our recommendation, because we think it's safer to witness in that way, because then you've got the electronic records. However, it's not compulsory. Like I said before, each territory and each country has different requirements. So it may be, that particular clinics only want to witness, a part of the actual treatment because they have other systems in place that they want to employ, for other parts of treatments. But yeah, our recommendation would be to label and witness every single step in the lab. We've got labels. There's no restriction on the amount of labels you can use, so there's no reason not to, really. And because it's a case of literally sticking a label on a dish or a tube, how long does that take? A second? There's no impact either. So, it would make sense to just, it makes more sense to witness everything. But like I say, it's not compulsory. If, like I say, we can completely configure Matcha to whatever your requirements are. We're not telling you how to witness in your clinic. You tell us how you would like to witness in your clinic. So you maintain the control in your clinic about what is witnessed and what isn't.
One more question is, how is a barcode read and how different it is from an RFID tag reading?
Okay, so yeah, a barcode is read by an imager device. So we talked about these pocket matches. So they have a little barcode reader in the top. So when it scans the actual barcode, it's reading and decoding the patient information within that barcode. So if a barcode contains the number, the patient ID 123456789, the system will automatically understand, okay, that is patient A. But also against sort of the RFID tags, I suppose, within Matcha as well, we can also now say this is patient A, but this is also their embryo number 1. So we can actually determine and specifically say, this is embryo number 1 for patient A. Whereas with RFID tags, as far as I'm aware, it asks you to confirm the patient identity, and then you have to confirm that, rather than the Matcha system, which tells you which patient you're working with. So, that's sort of the main sort of benefit for me, really, in terms of using barcodes against, using RFID tags. Yeah. And also there's the cryo storage aspect that I talked about before as well, whereas, barcodes can be stored under liquid nitrogen, whereas RFID tag can't, as far as I'm aware.
One question is from, suppose I intend starting a semen bank.
Mm-hmm.
A person deposits a sample. I have prepared 3 vials today. Subsequently, the same person comes next week, another 3 vials. So will the subsequent 3 vials be in continuity with the ones which are produced today, or will be having a different system the next time? So there is an additional load of new labels and codes. So maybe the confusion.
Okay. Yeah, good question. So you would use a different set of label sheets each time that that man returns to deposit, and that's because the actual labels, they contain the date of maybe the freeze or the date of the production of the semen, and when that's frozen, Matcha can record the date that obviously the semen is actually frozen. So that would be different each time the man returns to the donor bank. So each time the man returns, you would print off a new label sheet. It would have his name. If he's an anonymous donor as well, it would have the anonymous donor ID, because we can also anonymize label sheets as well for the protection of the identity of the patient. So yeah, each time the man returns to deposit, we print a new label sheet. It will contain all his information, including the date of production and any other customized information as well, if you wanted that, so that when that's stored, you know the date that it was produced.
So Mr. A, if he deposits the sample 4 times, so he will have 4 categories.
Yes, so we could have, so for example, in his patient record within Matcha, you would have 4 records. So it would say like, the 10th of September, the 15th, the 16th of September, and the 18th of September. And on those actual vials as well, you'd have the date, so you could differentiate between the 3. On the vials as well, you could have them actually numbered as well. So you could have freeze date of the 10th of September, vial number 1, 10th of September, vial number 2, 10th of September, vial number 3. That's all recorded within the Matcha system as well. So you have that electronic record, but also when you come to thaw any of those samples, you also know that, okay, I've got actually 3 vials in there. I want to thaw, however many.
Then one more important question is, do your labels have any expiry date that after a certain period of time, they won't be able to read the barcode or something of that sort? Or once they are stuck, they could be in a centralized repository. And another back-to-back question is all the data stored, and how much is the capacity? To what extent can we keep on storing that data? And whether it will be retrievable by us, by the clinic in times when needed?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 2 great questions there. So, in terms of the label expiry date, so from the date that we send any labels out, they have a shelf life of 2 years. Okay. So within those 2 years, if you've not used those labels, we'd recommend just to throw those out, just because of the storage for fresh. For any fresh processes. We also have the date labels on every label box that we send out to any of our customers, so they know when the expiry date typically is. In terms of the cryo label sheets, there's, like I say, there's no expiry date whatsoever. So like you say, we've had those in storage for well over a decade in cryo stores, and they're exactly the same as the day they were actually put into those vessels. So
can I just interrupt? So that means cryo labels and the routine usual labels are different.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So cryo labels have been scientifically validated, for use specifically under liquid nitrogen.
So prolonged storage in liquid nitrogen doesn't affect their efficacy?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay. So it is absolutely cryo friendly.
Absolutely. 100% cryo.
Fine.
Yes.
Then per case, you can have a number of labels at your disposal. There is no restriction to that.
No, no restriction whatsoever.
So in a nutshell, how we want to charge the patient is our forte as to how we want to do it. One patient, whether you do 1 fresh transfer, number of freezings, number of thawings.
Absolutely.
Fine.
Yes.
And as far as an emergency retrieval of data from your central repository, that can be added for or asked for.
Yeah. So in terms of sort of storing data, that's actually an interesting point. So especially with these mobile devices, the pocket matchers, we do not store any patient data on these devices. And that's really important. So if one of these devices goes missing, you can guarantee that there's no patient data on these devices. So once you've logged out of the system, nobody can access this. Once you've taken this outside the clinic, nobody can access it. So it's completely useless without having been actually physically connected to the Matcha system. It's also, the same with our desktop computers as well. So if you're using a Matcha tablet in a laminar flow cabinet, no patient data is stored on that tablet. So we use a separate server, and that's down to the clinic. The clinic dictates where that patient data is stored, because at the end of the day, that data is the property of the clinic. So it's the clinic's data. So that's entirely up to you. You may already have your own data protection mechanisms, fail-safes, backups, etc. But yeah, so we don't sort of, we're not responsible for your data. However, if you need any support or guidance with backing up any of your servers, or if you have a separate server that contains the Matcha data on there, of course, we can absolutely help either set up a server, or we can help you back up and protect that data, or help, employ any other sort of safety mechanisms that you may require as well. So yeah, at the end of the day, like you say, there's no risk of the patient data being stolen from the lab, because the devices are useless once they've been removed from site.
And one important question, in the eventuality of me setting up a new lab and investing into this witnessing system, what are the minimum things I should invest into initially so as to reduce my financial burden?
Well, in terms of employing sort of a matcher system, absolutely, to reduce the burden. Yeah, well, if you have, like we talked about before, a smaller clinic, it may be that you only need to use one of these pocket matcher devices. So that's going to straight away, make obviously the system cheaper. There's no upfront cost for matcher either, so you're not going to have to sort of physically purchase the devices, as well. So that can also reduce the cost if you're just, for example, leasing the devices as opposed to physically purchasing them as well. There's different sort of agreement mechanisms that can be put into place when actually purchasing the matcher system, whether the equipment just wants to be leased to reduce the upfront, or any cost, or, it can be paid sort of, using different methodologies, maybe on a 6-month or a yearly basis.
I think so. So that's it. We don't have any more because majority of them are just repetitive. How many tags per patient? Can it be customized as per the clinician specification? How many number of tags used? Least consumption of tags? What is the maximum capacity? So now literally it boils down to that how many tags are provided per patient, because we really don't know how many equipments or how many pieces of the laboratory where we use. We are not sure of the initial recruitment criteria. So how many eggs, how many embryos, how many frozen, how many subsequently used. So unless and until we set the ball rolling, we won't come to an amalgamated conclusion as to what exactly is in the store for us. Yeah, but exactly. I think the way you have put it out, so very crisp, very fantastic. I hope the message has gone deep down. This is the most important part, is to bring an awareness of traceability, safety, and security.
100%, absolutely.
So with that, sir, I really thank you on behalf of Shivani Scientific and all those present on this. Maybe anybody who will be interested will definitely get in touch with you via us or via email. And I really hope and pray also, because now the guidelines have been stringent. They need to be stringent because, as we all know, with a galloping number of cycles, increasing workload, increasing stress on the embryologist, confusion. So it's human nature. We are bound to make mistakes when there is overloaded with work. So let's hope and pray this really proves to be a real tool in our armature, whereas we can authentically say that mistakes are absolutely avoidable. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Ross, very much. It was a pleasure having you with us. Any subsequent feedback? There is one last question, sir. Configuration with current hospital patient management system. Can it be configured with that system?
Yes, so we can automatic. So first of all, we can link to your existing electronic EMR, electronic medical records, and we can also create a link so we can automatically import all of that information as well. So you're not having to create all of those patient records and manually type in that information again. We can import partner details, linked partner details. We can import donor details as well, custom fields. So if you have like a specific sort of national ID or passport number, or anything else, or medical insurance number or something like that that needs to be imported, that can be set up so that that can be imported automatically. So yes, we work with many different EMR systems, like I mentioned before, like Meditex and Ideas, and there's a whole host of others. I don't think we've worked with a clinic where we've not been able to integrate with their system. It just means we talk to the EMR company, make sure it integrates, and then when you come to use the system, you type in the patient ID, it will automatically search in the EMR, and then you can bring it in automatically, just to save you time.
Fine. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so very big thank you from Mumbai, India. Have a great day ahead. And
thank you to everybody as well. Thank you. It's been lovely to speak to everybody.
Okay, sir. Chalo, so we just log out.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Good day to you.